God did not make a mistake when he created your unique family. When he put those siblings together, he didn't make a mistake. So it can be a little overwhelming when you're trying to meet the needs of multiple kids, but understand that God picks up, he fills in all the gaps. I think that ultimately recognizing that helped me some, because I felt very guilty, like I had to give more attention here or there at different seasons and times. Fair is not about being equal. It's about giving each kid what they need.
Welcome to Our Life Homeschooling. My name is Sherry, Christian, wife to my high school sweetheart Nelson, and thankful mom to 10 incredible kids. I'm the author of the blog and YouTube channel Our Life Homeschooling, where I share homeschooling encouragement for everyday moms. I believe that motherhood is ministry, and homeschooling is simply an extension of parenting. My passion is to cheer on other moms who are at home doing the most important work of all, raising the next generation for the glory of God. Hi, and welcome back to the Our Life Homeschooling podcast. I'm excited to share with you today's guest. This is Katie from Life in the Mundane. She has an Instagram page and a YouTube channel with tons of YouTube videos all about choosing the right curriculum reviews, all about how to homeschool. Pretty much anything you want to know about homeschooling, she has answered in one of her videos on YouTube. She's going to be talking today about homeschooling children with special needs, and she's specifically going to remind moms, homeschool parents, that you can do this. So let's go ahead and jump right in to this conversation with Katie. Hi, Katie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on here.
Yes. I'm going to let you introduce yourself to my viewers. Tell us about you, your family, where people can find you.
Yeah, so my name is Katie, and I run the YouTube channel Life in the Mundane. I'm over on Instagram and I guess Facebook as well. And I share a lot about homeschooling and making it work for your family is a really big thing. So I'm a second generation homeschooler. I'm married to another second generation homeschooler. Wow. And we have 6 kids with a variety of special needs and special situations. We've got everything from academic special needs to medical special needs and everything in between. I do have 1, maybe 2 neurotypical kids. So I have a little bit of a feel for that as well, but we do a lot of adaptations in our home and a lot of personalization. And so we just love sharing about that because I know it can be a scary place for a lot of people when they are not sure how to actually make this all work.
Yeah. And I've been really excited to have you on because this is something I haven't talked about a lot on my channel. And I know there are families out there that need this kind of encouragement and support. So if you could think back to maybe the beginning years for you, what led you to homeschool your kids with special needs? Yes. And how did this shape your journey as a family?
Yeah, so it's actually a really interesting story, and I'll give you kind of the Cliff Notes version of it. But because my husband and I were both second generation homeschoolers, actually homeschooling had always been the plan. However, we had 4 of our 6 kids are very, very close in age. So when my oldest son was going into kindergarten, we had a 5-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And the first one and the 4th one had significant special needs. And I was planning to homeschool. This is what I wanted to do. I knew this was my heart's desire. I wanted to give my kids what I had. But I started second guessing myself. And I think a lot of parents do this. I started second guessing myself. I had many women who I believe truly were trying to be an encouragement. It was honestly a little discouraging though, who came up to me and they said, you know what, it's okay if you can't do it. And, it's not wrong if you just put them in school. Like, it's probably too much. Like, you have a lot on your plate. And they just kind of were constantly sort of putting in my ear this idea that maybe I actually couldn't homeschool my kids. And I think my stubbornness kind of dug my heels in and was like, well, watch. Like, I could do this. So I started homeschooling. But at the same time, my fourth child has a lot of medical special needs, and we were in the hospital every single month for at least a week at a time. She would be hospitalized. It was just sort of a whirlwind of a first year. And my husband finally came to me and he said, I think we need to put this down for a year. And that was so hard for my pride, right? I knew I could do this. I wanted to do this. I wanted to prove everybody wrong. And so we placed some of our kids into private school for a year and a half. And it was the best thing we could have done in that moment because my daughter's medical needs at the time were life and death situations, and they needed our full attention. But I was blessed to eventually be able to bring them back home and to homeschool them. But I think truly, I think that season was more about God saying, are you willing to let go of this thing that you're idolizing so much? And are you willing to say, I can homeschool in Christ's strength alone and not in my strength? Because I was very much at a place where I was like, I'm going to prove everybody that I can do this because I know what I'm doing. And
so good. That's so good.
No, you don't. And that's okay. And that's all right. So it shaped our homeschool in a lot of ways of just recognizing and coming to a place of being thankful for being able to homeschool and being more humble in that. And God has shown me time and time again that I have no clue what I am doing with these kids and that it is a challenge, but also a blessing, and that I should rely more on Him to get through it instead of my own previous experience or knowledge in those things.
Yeah, and it's through His strength. In our weakness, He is strong, and He's able to do far more abundantly above all we ask or think. And so when we rely on ourselves, it's foolishness, and we all do it.
Exactly.
But yes, wow, that's great. So through the years that you've been doing this, how do you balance the needs of your neurodivergent kids with your typical kids?
Yeah.
How do you balance that?
So like I said before, we have some that are completely neurotypical that have no issues whatsoever. And then I have some that have, ADHD or something, maybe a little bit more minor that is easier to, less needy, I guess, in some senses. So it's definitely been a balance to try to figure out how do we handle some of these more severe issues with my kiddos without making them feel like they're less than or don't get any attention. So I think ultimately what I would say is the way you do it is recognizing that God did not make a mistake when He created your unique family. When He put those siblings together, He didn't make a mistake. So it can be a little overwhelming when you're trying to meet the needs of multiple kids, but understand that God picks up, He fills in all the gaps, right? And there will be many gaps. So I think that ultimately recognizing that helps me some because I felt very guilty, like I had to give more attention here or there at different seasons and times. Fair is not about being equal. It's about giving each kid what they need. That being said, there are some practical things we've done to balance those needs. We have outsourced some things like therapies and whatnot and really tried to take advantage of that time where somebody else is working with one child to be able to plug in with another child. So now as they're older, I bring another child with me to therapy. And while that child's in there, I get to hang out one-on-one with them or work with them on their school or whatever it might be. So you can make those moments kind of balance. We also take breaks in the summer. So this is something that dear mom shared with me that really meant a lot was that she was like, you know what, Katie, she goes, especially for these kiddos who, if this is going to be a lifelong journey, this is more of a marathon than a sprint. Early intervention is super important and very helpful, but it's okay to take a break during the summer. So we started, I took her advice and we started taking a break from like speech therapy and occupational therapy, physical therapy, things like that during the summer. We would do at home stuff, so they were still getting what they needed, but we took that break so that we could be home and more plugged in with our kids during that time and help kind of cater a little bit more to what our other kids need. So I think there's a lot of ways that God gives you the wisdom to be able to figure out those things as you go. But I think understanding it's not going to be equal is probably best advice I can give to anybody in that situation.
Yeah. And one thing that just kind of stands out to me is you were mentioning about outsourcing some of those therapies and things. I think one advantage, and maybe you can certainly speak more to this than I could. One advantage when you have a child that has special needs that you have over the school system is that you have all the prior knowledge and history of their strengths, their weaknesses, the past therapies you've used that have worked, haven't worked. It's like you have this broad spectrum of their unique needs. And so I would just think that it would kind of cut to the chase a little bit more about knowing where to go, knowing what's not going to work. And I would think that would be an advantage. Do you feel like it's been that way?
Absolutely. I mean, if nothing else, there's more continuity of care when it comes to your child and their needs, whether that's academic or physical or mental or whatnot, because you as the parent are consistent, right? But also you get to choose your providers. You get to choose your child's therapist or their places they go.
Right.
And in the school system, every school system is a little different, but most of the time, as your kids graduate to different classes, they're going to have different teachers that have to relearn them. And you're going to have different therapists or different paras that are going to have to relearn how to work with them. And the advantage is I have therapists that are working with my kids that have worked with them since they were babies.
Right.
And are still working with them or got to work with them all the way through the program until they graduated. And that's a huge blessing because they didn't have to spend that time relearning my kid. They could just apply and keep going from there.
Right. Yeah, it's very minimal. I had just 1 year experience in the public school system as a special ed teacher. And I remember getting everyone's IEPs and reading through. And so, it's extensive. So you're reading through and trying to learn this child, trying to understand. But there was quite, there was a learning curve that was a couple months of knowing what this child was struggling with, what they needed, how. And so and that's something you don't have because you've been there, like you said, the continuity of care, you've been there all the way through. So you can just kind of move forward to the next thing and you're not having to figure out your child every year or someone else isn't having to do that for you. So,
and with IEPs, one thing I always tell people is I'm like, as a homeschooling parent, all of our kids, special needs or not, get IEPs. They get individualized education.
Right.
And the advantage is we're not taking something that was designed to apply broadly and having to majorly modify it. We get to pick and choose what works for our kids. So one thing we do in our home that is maybe a little different is I have 6 kids and very few of them actually use the same curriculum. There's only 2 curriculums that we use that every single kid in the house uses. And everything else is specialized to what they need and their specific needs. So I think that's really helpful that we have that ability to personalize.
Yeah, that's great. Yes.
And I'm honestly in awe of every special needs teacher out there. Or any teacher that's had kiddos with IEPs, because I've seen those IEPs and I'm like, how in the world do you remember all of that and keep that straight for all of these different students? Honestly, I'm like, it's just incredible that they're even willing to try and able to do that. But it's definitely easier when you're focusing on just the one or even all 6, right? You're able to do that more than having 50 students or whatever in a year.
Right. So you mentioned that you use different curriculums with each of your kids. Can you give like a specific example of how you've adapted the curriculums to fit each child's individual needs?
Yeah. So a lot of times people ask me, what's the best special needs curriculum? And the fact is, there might be a few that bill themselves as special needs curriculum, but there's really not such a thing in general as a special needs curriculum, nor is it really needed. It is about finding the one that fits best with your kids' strengths and weaknesses and is going to help support them as best as possible. So, for instance, I have a son who has severe dyslexia and really struggled with reading till quite an old age. And still, even to this day, is not as fluent as most of his peers. But I'm thrilled. We've made so much progress. And I've been able to support him through that because he's in high school and not reading at a high school level, but can understand and can comprehend and can articulate at a high school level. And so we've gotten him curriculum that has audiobook options, right? That
That's
offers
great.
those supports, that has that reads to him, or maybe that offers things like having try to remember the name of the resource now, but it's an app that will speechify, an app that will
Oh,
read to your child.
wow.
So they can take a picture of any book and it will follow along and read it out to them. And so they're able to consume any information that's at their academic level without being held back by their reading level.
And what's the name of that? Can you think of the name of
Yeah,
that app?
Speechify is the name
Oh,
of the app.
Speechify. Okay. Oh, wow. Wow, that's great. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking about some of my kids. I know specifically I've had a couple kids that really are so much more responsive to audiobooks, and maybe I can't get them to sit down and read through a book, but they will sit and listen to audiobooks for a long time and remember a lot of it, and most importantly, they'll enjoy it, which makes all the difference. So yeah, we found that to be really helpful as well.
And one great way that you can kind of bridge that, if you've got kids who prefer audio, but you would love for them, my friend Amy over at Humility Doxology talks a lot about reading with your eyes versus reading with your ears. And if you want to kind of bridge that gap between the two, is you can encourage your kids, you can buy a physical copy of the book or get it from the library, and have them follow along as they listen
Oh,
to
that's
audio.
great.
And that helps
Yes.
them with tracking and comprehension. It helps give them more exposure to seeing those written words. So I'll do that for certain reading assignments. And then, of course, the fun books that they pick out for themselves. I'm just like,
Yeah.
listen, enjoy. That's
Yeah.
great. So there's always a balance there. But I think it's something that we sometimes think it has to be all one way or the other. And we actually can blend a lot. We can think outside the box a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball
Yeah.
here and just ask you a question that I think a lot of moms, especially new homeschool moms, would maybe be asking themselves. Can you think back, and you mentioned that one of your kids has severe like medical or physical needs, but aside from that, did you have trouble being able to tell if your child was struggling with some learning disability? Did you, I just think there are probably moms out there that are wondering, is this typical? How did you distinguish between that?
Yeah, so I think that's something that's super common is people are like, is this, especially in the homeschool world, we talk a lot about going at your child's pace and not comparing them to other kids, which I agree 1000% with. But sometimes we can be like, okay, they're a little late to read. Hey, they're a little later. Like, at what point do we start being concerned? Like, there's just this.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yes, I've definitely had that with my oldest. He has high functioning autism. He has dyslexia, severe dyslexia, and auditory processing. And those have all come at different stages that we've realized. Initially, we noticed some speech delays, and that was it. And so we just pursued speech therapy for that. And then through speech therapy, his therapists were like, have you ever thought about maybe being screened and just seeing, because we're noticing a few other things. And I was like, oh, I didn't, like, the speech thing was the big problem right there in front of me, and it was the obvious thing, so we dealt with that. And so we opened that door, we went down that rabbit hole for a little while, and so, like, okay, and then as he got older, we realized there was dyslexia, and then as he got a little bit older even, we realized that there was auditory processing. So I think one thing I would say to those moms who are unsure is, if there's something obvious, if there is a significant struggle in an area, don't feel like you have to find the overarching answer all at one time. Pursue help and support for your child in that area of struggle, and do your best with the information you have.
Yeah.
And then if other doors or other potential possibilities or reasons come up, then you can walk through those doors in those seasons. Honestly, if I had found out all of these diagnoses when he was 2 years old and we started noticing the speech delays, it would have been massively overwhelming to me.
Right,
I'd be like,
right.
how can I help support this kid? But God providentially was like, all right, speech delays. I'm like, okay, let's learn what we need to learn
We
about
can do this.
support that. And then it's like, okay, autism. All right, let's figure this out. And we were able to support him all along. And I say that to encourage those who maybe are panicking. And I also say that to encourage those who maybe didn't find out till later and are feeling guilty. And knowing that God knew your child when he was knit together in your womb, or in the womb. And it's one of those things where it doesn't surprise him, and he'll make those things known as they need to be known. And we can just take it one day at a time and be faithful with information that we have, knowing that he's got it,
Yeah, right. That's a really great perspective. I love that.
It definitely took time to get to, though. So if people are struggling with that, it's understandable.
Yeah, and I really think that's going to encourage a lot of moms that are in that position right now. Can you think of some biblical truth that has anchored you as you're navigating the unique challenges of parenting and homeschooling kids that have special needs?
So I was thinking about this question, and I'm like, there's really a lot of truths. And one of them that you can probably just see in the way that I've talked about all the other questions is the fact that God knows, and we don't have to. God does he completes the work, right? And we're just called to be faithful in what he's called us to do. And so that's ultimately one truth that has been very, very helpful to us is focusing on that. I think another thing that has stood out to me is John 9, 1 maybe through 6. Is this story about the disciples, and they see the blind man, and they ask Jesus, which one sinned, right? Him or his father or his parents, that he would be born blind. And I'm paraphrasing, please forgive me for that. But Jesus responds back that his blindness is not about the sin, but it's so that he can be glorified, like so that that people can see Christ in that. And I think that's something that has been very impactful in our family's life, of realizing that the hardships, the struggles, whether it's struggling learning to read, dealing with a lot of extra energy and ADHD during lessons, or whether it is a life or death medical situation, these hardships, these hard things, God can be glorified in this. And we need to step out of the way and get rid of our own pride. Like, well, my child's struggling, so obviously people are going to judge me for homeschooling, and I should have done better. And to see how can God be glorified in this. And that's just been very encouraging to me throughout different seasons, of just being reminded of it's okay. And there is he is strong in our weakness, for sure.
Yeah. And this is for his honor, his glory. It's his name. That's great. Can you give some encouragement to a mom who feels unequipped, overwhelmed? I mean, I think parenting and homeschooling in general is by nature sometimes overwhelming.
Yes.
But then when you have unique challenges and not sure exactly how to handle them, or what your child needs, especially, I think of that with some of my kids, when your child has a need and you just don't know exactly how to help them. Can you give some encouragement to the mom who's overwhelmed or feels unequipped?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest, or one of the big encouragements for me, was learning that I, as a homeschool mom, am the manager of my child's education. I am not designed to be their only teacher in life. And so as a manager, my job is to be a student of my child, to know them well, to learn what I can, to observe, to pray, to figure it out, and then find the right matches for them, whether that's curriculum, whether that's a tutor, whether that's looking into therapies or counseling or whatever it might be. And when I started thinking of my job in that way, it gave a lot more freedom, because I didn't feel this burden of having to be able to know everything, to get my PhD in every diagnosis that my children got. And instead looked at myself as sort of a matchmaker for my children, right?
Yeah. Oh, what a great concept. That's great. Yeah. I mean, that takes the pressure off, is we're just trying to find the best resources for our kids.
Yeah. So, and I think one of the ways to do that is to reach out locally, if you have a support group, friends, family, Facebook friends that are local, being able to say, hey, I think my child could use some support in reading or in math or whatever it might be. Do you have any personal suggestions? I think that's a great place to start. Or people that you would avoid. That can also be.
That's important to know too, because there are some people that you just Just don't share your struggles because they're not going to be encouraging.
Exactly. And I know at one point, I should have looked this up beforehand, but at one point the HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, used to have a section on their website that had different providers and therapists and things like that who are homeschool friendly, specifically for special needs. I will say, whether they still have that list or not, they do have a phenomenal resource page for people who are homeschooling kids with special needs that has articles, it has tips, resources. They'll plug you in with different people or places. So I definitely recommend checking that out as a homeschooling special needs mom.
Yeah, that's great. And I can maybe try to link that below as well.
Yeah,
I'll look for that. Yeah, so that some parents can find that. Well, Katie, thank you so much. This has been really enjoyable, and I know a lot of parents are going to be so encouraged by what you had to share today. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you. And please know, if you are a homeschooling mom that has kids that are struggling, you can do this. It is possible, but you can do it in Christ's strength, not your own, and with a lot of help and support and resources. And if you need help and you're like, I need resources and I don't know where to get them, always feel free to DM me, send me a message. I'm happy to help as much as I can.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Katie.
All right, thanks. Bye.
All right, well, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you were encouraged. I know I was. Katie shared so many practical tips, great takeaways, and I know I'm reminded to lean on the Lord and to look at my kids individually. I do not have to carry all the weight of their education. The Lord sees, and He's going to direct us one step at a time. Thanks for watching today. I'll see you next week on the Our Life Homeschooling podcast.